Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, or Indiana Jones 5. Either way you want to look at it, it's coming out from the Walt Disney Company and Lucasfilm in the next 4 weeks. And if the last few weeks are any indication, well, it seems like this movie is going to struggle. We have initial box office projections now on the table following the first week or so of ticket pre-sales for this film. And the critics have not been very kind to this since its premiere at Cannes in France. Even some articles saying that audiences got bored during the viewing of the film and started having conversations in the theater while it was going on. It's not a good early sign. And if the numbers that we're seeing actually bear out to its opening weekend from this point, this movie is in some deep trouble. Let's get into it. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Now, before we get into initial box office projections, let's remind everybody how we got to where we are at this point. This, of course, from Rotten Tomatoes. We covered this in previous videos you've probably seen, and they're not very good. Disney made the unusual decision to premiere this film and lift the review embargo so far out from the debut of this film, nearly 6 weeks before this film was going to come out. And as you can see right here, 49% on the tomato meter for critics. Now, of course, Rotten Tomatoes is a site that simply aggregates critics' scores. You can take it or leave it for what you will, and more often than not, of course, we tend to just brush off a lot of Rotten Tomatoes numbers, but there is interesting data within them, even if they're not entirely useful all of the time. And that is, what are the critics actually saying in their individual reviews? Because if we click in right now, 49% for all critics, but if we go to top critics, the ones that Rotten Tomatoes, of course, deems the most worthy critical reviewers out there, that drops to 40%. That's a sharp decline at this point because critics, frankly, were none too happy with this, and you can go back and watch that video. We'll leave a link to it in the description of this one. Another thing I need to put into your field of view as a reminder is what you see on the screen now, and that is the box office run for Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This movie now came out 15 years ago, was released on a Memorial Day weekend. The domestic box office rounded out to $317 million US. The international box office rounded out to about $469 million. That put the worldwide box office just a tad shy of $800 million. Now, by today's standards, that's decent. That's pretty good for a movie of that size, although it's not blowing the doors off of anything. But back in 2008, even though this movie didn't receive a lot of audience and critical praise, it still did fairly good financially. Now, this movie, of course, was released by Paramount. This was prior to the Lucasfilm purchase by the Walt Disney Company in 2012. Paramount, of course, still has the distribution rights to this film, and as it was back in 2008, before the days of streaming services like we have them now, this movie got a long, financially lucrative shelf life after it left the theater and made hundreds of millions of dollars more after it exited. Now, one thing to consider is that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in 2008 did not have the Chinese box office market like this new Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny will probably be able to enjoy. The only question, of course, is how much will that box office really enjoy this film? Is it going to significantly move the needle enough, especially with a paltry 25% rental return back to Disney itself? Meaning, if the movie does $100 million at the Chinese box office, only about 20 to 25 million of that is actually going to make it back to Disney. But this is where things get really gritty. And you can see here on the screen right now, this is from Friday, June 2nd. This is the first actual box office projection that we have, because it's only been about a week or two since the movie premiered that ticket pre-sales have launched. So we're now able to start getting a glimpse of what this movie could do. Granted, we are roughly 30 days out from its release at this point, just right at 4 weeks from its release. we're going to get a rough idea of what this thing may do. Now, of course, these numbers could change. They could go up, they could go down. And of course, as you're going to see in a minute, the Walt Disney Company had better hope that these numbers go up significantly, quickly. From the pros side, the prospect of a new chapter in the Indiana Jones saga has ignited fan excitement in the years since Lucasfilm announced they'd pursue the film. Now, according to Box Office Pro, social media chatter has been mostly positive throughout the movie's long production history. Well, we can debate that, of course. But a wave of nostalgia helped Top Gun Maverick surpass $126 million over the first 3 days of its Memorial Day weekend opening last year. If Dial of Destiny manages to appeal to adult audiences, it could get a similar bump. Now, one thing I should note right there, the reason they bring up Top Gun Maverick is the same reason I have been looking to this as a comparative metric from a demographic standpoint. The Indiana Jones audience skews older more often than not, especially at this point in the game, just as Top Gun Maverick's audience did. Now, that means that usually fewer of those audiences actually purchase tickets in advance. So what Disney and Indiana Jones and Lucasfilm is hoping for at this point is that there's going to be a lot of walk-up traffic, which is partly why I believe we see such a wide range of projections even this far out that we'll talk about in just a minute. If those adult audiences show up with families in tow, as it happened with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in 2008, Dial of Destiny could end up more backloaded than the typical franchise film. And now for the cons. The monkey on Dial of Destiny's back is the mixed reputation of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull from 2008, and of course it's been 15 years since then. Early critics' reviews from Cannes have been mixed, and the film currently stands at 49%, which of course we just covered. Now these last two are key. A mixed critical reception doesn't always mean family audiences will stay home. See Super Mario Brothers movie. Yeah, but the audiences were jazzed to go see that way before the critics' reviews came out. The opposite is the case here with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. If families do stay away from Dial of Destiny, Indiana Jones's final adventure could prove more front-loaded than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And finally, and this is the big one, a gauntlet of summer competition lies ahead of Dial of Destiny, with Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, Barbie, and Oppenheimer, among others, coming to cinemas in July. And yeah, Dead Reckoning Part 1, Mission Impossible, starring Tom Cruise, is coming out 12 days after Indiana Jones drops in theaters. That means it's going to have a very short run, having the bulk of those premium large format screens all to itself. But as of right now, here's the numbers. Opening weekend for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is sitting at $81 to $111 million, with a possible total run of $225 million to $380 million. Of course, these are domestic market only figures. That, frankly, should be terrifying to the Walt Disney Company, to Kathleen Kennedy, to Bob Iger, to Lucasfilm at all. This is a big problem because, let me go back and show you again, what did Kingdom of the Crystal Skull do 15 years ago? Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in 2008 had an opening weekend of $100 million. That's actually more than the low-end range of Dial of Destiny, of Indiana Jones 5. That's a major problem. If it hits the midpoint and gets up to this $100 million, that's still not great news because this is 15 years later. In 2008, the average U.S. ticket price, according to the National Association of Theater Owners right here, was $7.18. And we have consistently seen reports from Intelligence, as cited by Deadline magazine, with major blockbuster openers for the past 12 months, that these ticket prices on opening weekends for the caliber of a film like Indiana Jones 5 and the Dial of Destiny, you're looking at something along the lines of $13 a ticket on those opening weekends. Even if we skew that back and just say 12, it's very easy at this point to see that average ticket prices have increased at least 50%, if not 60 to 70%, since this point. So now, if we look back at Kingdom of the Crystal Skull's opening weekend at $100 million, if we just planted the same number of butts in seats over this movie's opening weekend, that $100 million in 2023 would be closer to $150 million. And that domestic box office total of $317 would look a lot more like 450 to 500. In other words, in 2023, with the same number of people going to see Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, this movie would have done well over $1 billion at this point. It would look like Super Mario Brothers movie does right now. So for Indiana Jones 5, for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny to come in with this, to come in with $81 to $111 million as its initial projection, granted, that can change, and Disney better hope that it does, that's awful. That's straight awful. Because, of course, the biggest problem is that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull came in at about $180 million in production. This new movie, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, already had a $300 million price tag, and that was before January 1st of this year, when there was still a lot of post-production VFX going on. But if we go back and look at Kingdom of the Crystal Skull's breakdown, about 40% of its box office came from the US, 60% from overseas. If that actually holds up this time, with the projections that we just showed you from Box Office Pro, that means that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is going to turn in a box office that theoretically should be very similar to Crystal Skull. Meaning if that movie opens as it's predicted to now and legs out just like this other one did from 2008, it's going to haul in around $750 to $800 million globally, and that's going to be about it. This is a movie that needs at least $1 billion just to find a break-even point. And as I continue to remind folks, there's really no financial life for movies that come from Disney after they leave the theater, since Disney consumes all of its own products internally now on its own proprietary streaming services. They don't license things out anymore like Paramount did with this movie, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, back in 2008. The bottom line is that the Walt Disney Company has a big problem with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. The marketing campaign has already gotten started. Of course, the largesse of it will come probably in about 2 weeks from now when they really start ramping things up. The question is, will audiences actually care at that point? See, back in 2008, we didn't have the internet and Rotten Tomatoes and YouTube in the same capacity that we do today, where every bit of information on a movie like this is out there almost instantaneously. If it's Twitter, it's Facebook, or anywhere else, people are going to know everything about this movie before it comes out. When Kingdom of the Crystal Skull happened, all we knew basically was the trailers and maybe a few reviews. This movie has been getting a lot of attention in the wrong way in the last few weeks, and I think that's going to have a tremendous impact. Short of audiences actually going to this film and lighting up the internet with praise for it, this movie could be, as Box Office Pro suggests in their cons, far more front-loaded than its predecessor, which means that those projections over the total run of this film could be high. We'll be tracking this for the next few weeks because each week these figures will get updated, and we're going to keep a constant eye on it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Make sure you join us on the Sunday live show. We'll be talking about this one for sure. And until then, take care.